Hey, y'all, welcome back to a Wednesday, July 31st, 2024 edition here on the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. We got a two-parter here on today's show because it's just a lot of information. So we're breaking this episode up into two parts. First up, we got Tennessee Vols Sports Guys with Rocky Top Insiders Ryan Schumpert, Omaha Productions, and Jack Foster to talk all things Tennessee Vols. So we talked about whether or not Cannon Peebles, Stone Lawless, or who might be the catcher for Tennessee in 2025. Will it be a rotation? What to expect there for Tennessee baseball? The top 5 recruiting class, where Tennessee is currently hovering around here in the 2025 cycle, heading into fall camp this week. And we also preview the Tennessee Vols football linebacker room and what that looks like coming into this season. And then why the Oklahoma and Arkansas road SEC games right out of the gate might be a little bit more tricky than some folks might anticipate. So all that and more coming up next here on today's edition of the Chase Thomas Podcast. Don't forget, folks, before we dive into today's episode, you can watch this show on YouTube, youtube.com/Chase Thomas Podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe the videos as we get full episodes, clips, shorts, all that good stuff over here on the Chase Thomas Podcast YouTube feed. Well over 2,000 subs now, and appreciate you guys following along and joining in each and every day if you prefer to watch this show. Also, you can listen to this program. So if you're an Apple Podcast, Spotify, or however you get your podcast listener, and you have not already done so, you know what I'm about to ask. Please, please, please make sure you hit that pause button right now and leave this show a 5-star rating and write us a review. It helps other people find the show, and it helps this very show continue to grow. You can get in touch with the show at chasethomaspodcast@gmail.com. And you can also go check out our homepage, website, chasethomaspodcast.com, where you can get information about the show, previous episodes, all that good stuff over there on chasethomaspodcast.com. All right, Uncle Darren, let's go.
The Chase Thomas Podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me over there, also in Knoxville, Tennessee, Mr. Ryan Schumpert of Rocky Top Insider. Ryan, good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's officially fall camp time. Well, I say it's not quite officially fall camp time. Tomorrow, Wednesday, will officially be fall camp time. But it's like first day of school. We've had a nice little 5-week summer break. Now we got Tennessee's in-house media day today. I talked to Josh Heupel, Tim Banks, Joey Halsley, and a lot of players. So it kind of feels like the official start to the athletic calendar today. So excited to be back.
There you go. Jack Foster of Omaha Productions is also here. Jack, good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, Chase. And Ryan, that's a good point. It's almost like the half day, right? You know how when you always started school, there was this meaningless half day where you did absolutely nothing and you got out of school at like 11:30, 12. And you know what always sucked is when it was on a Thursday. Like they would put the half day first day on a Thursday, and then your first full day was a Friday. It made no sense. You couldn't get any sort of rhythm. No,
you're right, but it eases you in. You get a little half day Thursday, a little Mickey Mouse Day Friday that you're probably also not going to do anything on, and then it just very slightly eases you into the real first day of school is that Monday. All-time Sunday, scariest day every single year. That first Sunday before the first full week of school. It's pointless, but I like it, or liked it, I should say.
I guess for the kids, it wouldn't matter too much, but just looking at it from like a intelligent standpoint, it doesn't make any sense from the school.
No, that's true.
You know, if I was a teacher, I'd be like, this is so dumb. So, but I'm doing well, Chase. It's been a good week. Had my birthday a couple days ago, so no longer 21, now 22. Reality, look, I've always said this, and it honestly, it kind of came true 2 days ago, but birthdays don't matter after 21. Maybe you can say 25 matters a little bit, but 30, 40, those decade counts, like that's just depressing. Birthdays after 21 don't really matter.
Shots fired. Like, I mean, like
old man.
I was gonna say, like, I think my birthday still mattered, Jack. What a young guy thing to say. Well, what a
No,
young man thing to say is that nothing matters birthday wise when you hit your 30s and 40s. Forget those milestones that is your life that you don't have any control over, time passing you by. Yeah, you shouldn't celebrate those milestones of getting older and in life, more comfortable. I'll have you know, Jack, your 30s better than your 20s. Like the 30s, because like you're more 100%.
Sell.
You're only 22. You have no context for this. I've lived it, sir. I've lived the 20s. I'm in the 30s.
I'm just gonna go ahead and say that's false.
It's not. It's not false. It's great because you know who you are. You've gotten a good rhythm. There's not really any surprises. Like your personality and I mean life, like your choices. Like like I met my wife at the right time because like there's just something about like I know who I am at that point. Like I'm pretty settled. You've dated around. You kind of know what works for you, what doesn't. You get out all the like what kind of jobs you want. You know what kind of jobs you don't. You know what kind of people you want to work for. You know who you want to surround yourself with. Friends come and go. It's just you get like 20s is about experimentation and trying and failing, and then 30s you're like it's pretty settled. You kind of know what you want. You kind of know where you're going. You kind of just know what's ahead. Like you're not going to change that much from 33 to 37. From 22 to 30, a lot of change as a person.
Okay, maybe about just enjoying life. I can potentially see where you're coming from, but as far as your birthday actually holding any sort of significance, like I said, the decade when you reach 30 and 40, okay, that's significant, but it's also not something that you're like super thrilled about. You're just getting older.
I was
21
thrilled. What do you
is
mean?
the
It's
last
cool.
birthday
I was
you
thrilled.
were just unbelievably excited for. After that, you're like, or dang, I'm getting old.
25 is nice in our world because renting cars is very beneficial.
True.
But it's not like
That's
something I was
21.
excited about turning 25 so I can rent a car. It's just like, okay, this is a nice thing to be able to do now.
That's a weird thing. What an arbitrary age to rent a car.
So strange.
10 years nearly from when you can actually drive a car.
Exactly.
That makes no sense. Like that should be an 18 one. I understand like a minor, like you don't like that, but anything 18 and up, you should be able to rent a car, especially if you have insurance. Who cares? Like what are we doing here?
Yeah,
I think everything should be 18. License, all of it.
I think. I mean, I tend to.
I mean, I did not know how to drive when I turned 16. I totaled a car within my first 2 months. There's no reason I should have had a license. Now I feel like I'm a pretty good driver. And I felt
Are
like
you
I
a
was
fast driver or a slow driver? Because my wife is a fast driver, and I drive like an old man. Like I'm in the right lane. I'm hanging out. I'll get there when I get there. I'm not. I'm a very low key driver.
I'm definitely on the faster side, but I wouldn't say I'm just like unbelievably like always going 12 over. But yeah. I guess I'm on the faster side. I definitely, if I'm on the interstate, I'm attacking the interstate. I'm not just sitting back.
Attacking the interstate. He's got the hypo offense on the interstate. Don't stay away from Jack when he gets on 40. That's when it's go time. I feel like Ryan's a low key driver. I would be surprised if Ryan was an aggressive, just like I'm going 25 over, and I got places to be like passing all the time. That doesn't seem like Ryan's personality type.
No, I'm more of a slow driver, I would say. And I'm also, to the conversation earlier, I'm like, and I have for about 8 years now, just had the personality of a 50-year-old man. So as I get older, it's just better. I'm just kind of aging into my personality. It's more socially acceptable for me to be who I am the older I get.
I mean, that's true. And I mean, I can empathize there because it is there. There's less social expectations, especially when you're married in your 30s and everything. It's like I can't. I'm not gonna do that. Like I don't invite me out. Like don't invite me to your thing. I don't want to go. I been there, done that. I'm good. I'd rather stay home and watch House of Dragon. That's kind of what I would rather do. And it's more socially acceptable to become a homebody in your mid 30s when you're married. Like it's just a lot less pressure to go do. And you can also just be like, I'm in my mid 30s. I can just say no. Like I'm just not doing it. Like no, I don't feel like doing that, so I'm not gonna do that. Been there, know what to expect. No, I'm good.
One of the great things about, low key great things, and I guess this depends on your personality, but one of the great things about our job is working every Saturday, and it's just, I'm not going to your wedding. Sorry, I can't. I gotta work. Oh man,
you have an easy out.
I'm missing it. I'll buy a gift on the registry for you, but I ain't gonna be there. And
I can confirm because I'm
fantastic.
pretty sure I invited Ryan to my own wedding 2 years
Yeah.
ago, and it was like, folks, it was Akron,
Wait,
and Ryan still was like, can't do it. He
you
was
had a
like,
fall wedding?
Mhm. But we planned it for the Zips. It was
Chase.
fine. It was the Akron game. It was
It was
fine.
fine,
Still.
but him trying to shame me into thinking I was supposed to skip one of the 12 biggest money makers for my company all year, one of the 12 biggest money making days. For my aspect, I couldn't do it.
I don't
Didn't
know.
mind that I couldn't do it either. With all due respect, did send a gift.
You
Can't
did.
say I didn't send a gift. I sent a gift, but
You know,
True.
I feel like people would be pretty split on that. Like, is Ryan a bad guy for not missing the Akron game, or is Chase non-ball knower fake fan for having a fall wedding?
I think
I feel
Chase
like it'd
is.
be pretty split.
I think it's kind of fine because again, it's Akron. For like just a normal fan who didn't have to do the game for his job, like I would expect him to. I don't think it's a big deal to skip.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
but
it's also
also
for
skipping my
family and
cousin's
thinking
wedding
about my
last
family
year,
because I have a lot of
that makes
Tennessee
me feel
fans in the
better.
family, and like it was one of those where you just don't want to be that guy. If you're going to do a fall wedding, I think the least thing you could do at fall wedding in the South is do a schedule check and make sure what you're
Yeah.
picking for the majority of the people coming to the wedding, that you're not
Right.
picking, like, if you're a Tennessee fan and you do Tennessee Bama like third Saturday in October, like I don't care how nice the weather is or what the venue is, like that's wild behavior. You can't do it. Like you got to read the room. Like Florida game, Alabama game, there's certain ones you just can't do. And at September wedding, our weather was perfect. It worked out, but it was Akron. So I was like, I also looked at it from my perspective of I don't want to be thinking about what's happening while I'm getting married. Like I don't want my mind to be like, oh man, how's Hendon performing as I'm getting ready to say my wedding vows. Like you don't want that to just to permeate into your thoughts on your wedding day. So for me, I do know that the next morning, like I watched the whole game from beginning to end on my phone as we were on our way to our mini moon. So I did watch.
Okay, you made up for it. That's
Yeah.
sicko behavior, so I'll give you a pass on that.
Oh yeah.
When did Chase? When did you figure out? And it might have been the next morning watching it that Cedric Tillman got hurt with Akron players diving at his legs.
I saw it. I didn't know because I hadn't checked my phone or anything, so I
Okay.
just watched the game live and was like, "Oh, that was at one of I reacted in the car because Sam was driving, I think, and it was one of those where that's not good. That was one of those that really scary and it was dirty. I remember being really mad because it was a dirty hit and it obviously affected Cedric's entire season. He got tightrope surgery and all that, and was really never the same. I mean, he got a lot of targets in the Georgia game, but he was just not who he was, especially in the Pitt game, and what he did in that one. It was just night and day from what Tennessee needed. But either way, y'all. Well, there you go. Jack doesn't believe anyone over 25 should ever be happy or ever celebrate things because we're too old, and we should just be happy that we're existing at all. From Jack Foster of Omaha Productions. Again,
next milestone after turning 25 is retirement. Put it that way.
God, this is the most 22-year-old thing I've ever heard to kick things off. Well, we have some like Jack and Ryan talked about here. We're taping this on a Tuesday, so that means Tennessee Media Day here with guys coming back to campus. A lot of guys that are available. I think it's like 12 players will be available today. So we'll get our first glimpse of some Tennessee players and what they look like coming into fall camp starting tomorrow. But before we get into Tennessee football, let's do some Tennessee baseball that I wanted to ask Ryan and Jack about here. So one of the things that as we look to 2025 and what the Vols repeat odds are going to be and what the roster is ultimately going to look like, I think catcher is one of those things that fans have just kind of penciled in Cannon Peebles as the catcher for Tennessee in 2025. Ryan, do you believe that it's Cannon's job to lose? Do you think folks should assume it's going to be Cannon because there is real competition there with Stone Lawless and company? Like, is it set in stone? Could it be like that actually Cannon Peebles is the DH and maybe he gets some opportunities at catcher and he gets more DH opportunities next year because he was just really good eye at the plate and he really came on at DH for an important at bats for Tennessee down the line? Or maybe first base? Like how set in stone is it that Cannon Peebles will end up being the everyday catcher for Tennessee next year?
I mean, I don't really think it's set in stone, and a lot of that's just the nature of the position because you just largely don't have an everyday catcher. Even if you're the weekend catcher, you're not going to be starting in the midweeks. And a lot of Tony teams have been, 2-1 with one catcher starting on Friday and Sunday and then another starting on Saturday. So just by the very nature of the position, both those guys are going to, or Stone Lawless, I guess, if you're considering Cannon Peebles the favorite, which I would going into the year, Stone Lawless is going to get a lot of opportunities. And not a single one of us would have said Kyle Stark would have ended up being Tennessee's starting catcher at this time last year. So, I don't think it's set in stone by any means. I do think Cannon Peebles is the favorite. I think from what I have seen, and this is just watching practice in a very untrained eye, I think behind the plate, both those guys are pretty similar. I don't see a huge discrepancy either way. And I think Stone Lawless, while his bat's definitely good, is just a question mark because we haven't seen it in any sort of games. And it did feel like, while the power never came for Cannon last year, it did feel like just the productivity of his at-bats, he did kind of figure out really the last month to 6 weeks of the season. It felt like he didn't always get opportunities. But even by the last couple SEC series, it felt like his at-bats were just a lot better than they were early in the season. So I think he's the favorite. I don't think you by any means Sharpie him in as the starting everyday catcher because you just know both those guys are going to get opportunities. And as we learned last year, really anything can happen.
What do you think, Jack?
Yeah, I echo that. I would say Cannon is probably going to start the vast majority of games at catcher next season. He feels like a strong candidate to be the starter. And I think you have to love with what he showed at the end of this past season, as Ryan kind of said, with the productivity of his at-bats, just being arguably the best eye on the team down the stretch. It seemed like anytime there was a big moment, he's pinch hitting, or if he's DHing, he was able to at minimum work a walk. And yeah, the power wasn't there, but the numbers at NC State aren't fake. He has shown the ability to have a really, really good season at the plate, and he started as Tennessee's cleanup hitter day one last season. So the potential's there. Tennessee knows the potential's there. Cannon raked in the preseason last year. He was, I think, the best bat on the team from what Ryan told me leading up to opening day for Tennessee when you take into account practices, scrimmages, all that. So Peebles has a ton of upside. He could certainly have a bounce back season at the plate, and I think he's solid defensively. Sure, Stone will probably get some opportunities, maybe at minimum midweek nods every week. But yeah, I feel like Cannon has to be the guy you point to at that position.
Yeah, I just went back and found this, Jack, actually, before you even said it, but just the fall stats from last year, what I was able to track, which I think was like 8 or 10 scrimmages that either myself, Ben McKee, or Mike Wilson were at. He had 483, 14 of 29, 4 home runs, 11 RBIs, and a double and a triple. So, I mean, he raked in the fall, and he was good again in the preseason. That was a good point by you that he started to clean up in the season opener, and that wasn't by accident. So the talent's clearly there, and it felt like the process got a lot better by the end of the year. And if he can stick with that, with his talent, it feels like the results will follow.
Is the defense stuff overblown? Because I think I think part of it is just Cal Stark was such an elite defender that then you just go, is Cannon Peebles like Evan Russell? And that's not to say like in terms of like, where is he closer to? Is there a path to Cannon being an elite defensive catcher? Does he have the skill set? Is that something that Tennessee expected when they got Cannon, and that he could grow into it? Or is it still just going to be mostly a power bat and you want to get by with Cannon at catcher?
I think it's a little bit in the middle there. I think maybe just getting by is like a little too negative of a connotation. I definitely don't think he's a bad defender.
And I mean, getting by is an average. Like, he's an average defender. He doesn't have like a high like Cal Stark ceiling, which I don't think a lot of catchers do defensively.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. Like, I don't think he's gonna become an elite defensive catcher. Obviously, he can continue to get better, and I think he was fine last year. Like, I don't think he was even bad last year. So he can probably improve off of fine, average, and maybe be above average. I don't necessarily see the ceiling as like being an elite defensive catcher there, but it's not a problem. I don't think that's like a knock on his ability to start for Tennessee at all either.
Yeah, I think Cannon has a pretty good arm. Yeah, Cannon's got a cannon, and we saw that a couple of times last year. But Cal's awareness was just unbelievable, and it's going to be hard to replicate that behind the plate for Tennessee. Where you're talking about the back pick, of course, that was his play, but even in big spots with runner on third. And there were just so many weird situations Cal executed perfectly last year. And it's maybe going to be a little bit tougher to rely on that to happen every time with Cannon behind the plate or anybody else. So Cal kind of maybe spoiled Tennessee fans and Tennessee too. But it's not to say that Peebles is bad at all. And I think he's shown in his limited opportunities last year that he's pretty dang good back there too.
I like it. Switching gears here a little bit. One other baseball thing. I don't know, Ryan or Jack, you can answer this. I could, because I'm on the out here and I'm listening to different folks talk about this. And it seems like with the new scholarship stuff that's coming down the pike here for January 2025, baseball is probably going to be the most affected. Like I know a lot of folks are talking about walk-ons of football, but I still think that's TBD on how much that actually affects the football programs, with especially the Power Two and company over the next couple of years. Baseball, with the amount of scholarships and things like that, have you heard anything from Tony on how he feels? Did they expect this to be coming down the pike and have been planning accordingly? How will this change Tennessee baseball going into next year and the rosters and scholarships and all that?
And to me, it's fascinating because it's just such a wholesale change. It's so radical, and I think there's good and bad. I don't think really any coach likes the roster decrease,
Mm.
or any SEC coach, I should say. I think the mid-major
Mid-majors
coaches
love
like
it.
it a lot. They like it a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the thing about baseball. It's so weird. They'll bring so many guys in for the fall that no fan will ever even, maybe not so many guys, but a number of guys in the fall no fan will ever hear of. He won't make his
Mm.
freshman will be gone by a second semester. So I think from that aspect, I don't like it, but I just think overall it's still such a positive. And you
Do they
look, I
expect
think,
that though? Was that something that they knew was probably inching towards that? Like this would be the last fall where they would have this kind of
I
opportunity?
I think that it was like definitely going to increase, but as far as having 34,
Mm.
like everybody scholarship is, that can happen. I don't think that was the expectation. I think that's more than what everyone thought. That's at least
Mm.
from the articles I've read.
and I think it'll be curious, like, what do these conferences step in and do? Because I think it's got to be conference wide. Like if the Big Ten has 34 baseball scholarships, I'd be really surprised. Like
Hmm.
the way they fought against having to pay a third coach, like I'd be shocked if they want to do 34 scholarships. So what does that look like from a conference to conference standpoint? Obviously, the SEC is going to be more committed or as committed as any other conference. Does that mean 34 scholarships, 30? I don't know. But I think it'll be conference by conference rules, and I think there's a very real chance that you'll continue to see the rich get richer in college baseball, and the gap between the mid-level conferences and the top conferences just get wider and wider.
Yeah, that's a good point. It feels like if you have more money and you're able to, you know, put 34 players on scholarship that are 34 good players, then the rich are going to get richer. And that helps Tennessee, of course, that helps the SEC. But I also think, going back to what we were saying a little bit earlier, like the Sun Belt, who's, great mid-major conference, it helps them too because of the roster restrictions, you know, for the sport. So with only 34 players able to be rostered, better players are going to be going to those mid-major teams. So I think it's great for college baseball all in all. Like it's win-win-win. It feels like for the most part. Of course, there's some losses here and there, but it's wins all around for me.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic, and you've seen in recent years, and I think NIL is a part of it, but just growing college baseball is too, where more and more prep prospects go to college and don't go to
Mm.
draft. Like what this past year, it was like somewhere in the mid-teens was the first high school kid to get drafted. I mean, that's pretty crazy, and I just think that's going to continue. And I mean, in the past, like, yeah, it's you certainly cannot blame a kid, especially if he's not from a well-off situation, to go pay these SEC tuitions with a 30% scholarship for 3 years, or go get a signing bonus and start playing professionally. Like it's just financially, it's just not a decision that makes sense. And if you're on full scholarship on top of NIL, all of a sudden it does make sense, and it does make sense to go develop in a part of the game where you're going to have more eyes on you, where development is better, where competition is better. I think in the whole, is college baseball right now is probably close to peak popularity. It's only going to get better as more and more of the top players decide to come to college instead of going straight from high school to professional baseball.
Well, I don't even know if we're close to the peak. I think we're at peak SEC baseball in the nation, just because of how locked in so many SEC's fan bases are in the spring and into the summer. I think we should throw the Big 12 and the ACC in there too, by and large. But I mean, you mentioned the Big Ten, and what does this mean for the Big Ten? Because I mean, they just have not been a factor in that regard. I mean, UCLA has a good history, maybe with them in the Big Ten that will help things. There is talent. Like one of the weird things, is, like so many of Tennessee's best players, like you look at it and you're like, Kansas has just been this great spot for Tennessee to get stars. Like, what if the Jayhawks and the Kansas State Wildcats and certain programs, like they benefit from this rule and getting some guys that they not necessarily would have gotten in the pre-scholarship options that are coming in January 2025. I just think it's better for the sport altogether, but I do wonder, and we can put a pin in it here, like, does this mean we're going to have less diamonds in the roughs that work out for Tennessee and some of the big dogs, where that competition in the fall, you can kind of weed out, like, yeah, he was he had the star rating, he was someone in the top 100 at this, then the other, but then we learn early on, before we even get into the preseason and everything else, he's not going to play for us. It's not going to work. There's personality issue, whatever. Like it's not a good fit. We misevaluated this guy. Let's go with this guy. I wonder if there are more teams like Tennessee are going to be stuck with certain guys because of these scholarship limitations, and you're not going to be able to experiment and weed some guys out of the program that would have been weeded out in early iterations. Is that fair? Does that make sense?
So you're talking like the KTs, the Jarrell Ortegas, that kind of deal? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right, just because at least the recruiting rankings in high school baseball are, not super accurate, or certainly far from the Bible to go off of. So, yeah, I think from that standpoint, you're just going to take less players. But evaluation is always key. It's not like any of these SEC teams are looking at their recruiting rankings as what they go off of to scout.
You just can't throw as much at the wall. Like, I just feel like the Vitellos and the big dogs here in the sport are able to just throw a lot of stuff at the wall in the fall and winter, see what sticks, and then be ready to go. And I just feel like you're not going to be able to do that in this era. Maybe to some extent, but just not the same.
No, not the same. And I think the alternative of that, I think there's going to be a lot more good mid-major players available in the transfer portal every year. And certainly Tennessee has recruited the portal about as effectively as anybody. So it's going to be changed. And you're right about that. And Tennessee and everybody else will have to adapt to it. But hard not to
we have to do this. Like the feeder program all across college sports. Like that's just kind of where it has to go. And these feeder programs have to, like, if you're smart, I think I was reading, was it Toledo's basketball coach who kind of has leaned into that the last couple of years, where it's like the sell is, hey, come here and I'll develop you to get you paid for your next job or for your next stop in your junior year. Like that, if you want to get talent, you want to win a lot of games and do that, and then you can get some, like, it's finding the right combination of those young guys who want to get to that next spot and don't take it personally that they're going to leave your program in a year or two if they do really well, but then also recruit the guys who were at those bigger programs, aren't getting the opportunities, and want to showcase more. And they would need to go down a level because they thought they were at this level, but they actually need to go down. And you see what that blend looks like. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with that style. And I just feel like if you're not at that point at one of these mid-major programs, or you're the G5 level, and you're not accepting just the new reality of college sports of like you're a feeder program, and don't look at it as a negative, just look at it as this is what it is, and we can build with it, right? Like I just feel like that's kind of where it's going all across college sports, and these kind of rules just make it more so.
Yeah, 100%.
Switching gears here a little bit. Fact or fiction? Tennessee will close with a top 10 class, Jack Foster. And then part 2 of this question: what stands out to you most about the recruiting heater that Josh Heupel and the Vols are on right now?
Yeah, obviously they're on a heater. If you look at 247, they're 6th right now. I think with the momentum they have right now, I would bet that they would finish top 10. And what I like most about the class is just the versatility of the class. And, there's multiple different positions Tennessee was able to hit on. I mean, you go up and down the list, whether it's quarterback, offensive line, tight end, defensive line, wide receiver, safety, maybe not corner, but they have 3 in the class. Edge, they checked a lot of boxes. If you look at On3's rankings for Christian Gass, they hit big on a linebacker. So there's a lot to like about this class. There's a lot of boxes they checked. And I think top to bottom, when you look at all the positions, Tennessee kind of has a little bit of everything, which is a nice thing to have for potentially a top 10 class.
Ryan, here's your moment to shine. I feel like I need some dramatic music here because Jack knows where we're going with this, because Ryan Schumpert is ready to pour some cold water on Vol Nation here. So Ryan,
Well,
go ahead.
you changed the standard. Yesterday, Chase has a
Yeah, it was
headline
top
on the
5. Now it's
podcast:
top 10.
Tennessee pouring to or heading towards top 5 class, or looks like a top 5 class. That is a real headline on the Chase Thomas podcast, or at least on the tweet. I don't know about the podcast itself. And that was I was going to pour some water on. Top 10, yeah. I mean, I think probably. Right now, I think by star rating, it's like 10th, or by average recruit ranking, it's like 10th. And I think it'll probably. I think if Tennessee gets David Sanders, it'll be a top 10 class, and if they don't, it probably won't be. That's how I feel about it. And it'll.
So you're saying if they don't get David Sanders, it won't be a top 10 class?
That's my guess. Yeah, I mean, I think it probably ends up somewhere like 7 to 12. And obviously David Sanders coming is a big deal about it. My thing yesterday that I was giving you some hate for is I genuinely don't see the path to it being a top 5 class. I just don't see it. Unless they get Josh Petty too.
I was going to say, I think the path is they've still flipped Perlotti, the 4-star linebacker out of Buford. And then I think it's probably getting Darian Smith, defensive tackle, out of St. Francis. And then probably you need, because I think they're done at receiver. And then maybe Dwayne Morris, if you're able to get him, as he's trending up more in the blue chip or 4-star. It depends on who you look at. And then you probably, though, to really secure a top 5, I think you're going to need Gaston plus Sanders, or like you said, Petty plus Sanders. I think you would need both to kind of really, really be in that top 5. And also, you don't need both. Like you really, and I think, Jack, I would be surprised. I would say, I would almost say floored if Tennessee does not end up with one of Sanders, Petty, or Gaston. Things are trending too well there. Like Petty grew up a Tennessee fan. Gaston's been quiet, and Tennessee's in the final 3. Obviously, his teammate Travis Smith already committed here, and then obviously they've been trending well for David Sanders for months now. So I think there's too much there's too many good signs for all 3, and you're not going to get all 3, but that Tennessee lands one of them just still feels the most realistic path.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just don't think getting one of them gets them a top 5 class. I think getting one of them makes it close to a lock or an almost certainty that Tennessee is a top 10 class, assuming they don't do what happened last year when they got their last commit in August and then they proceeded to whiff on the next 15 targets they had during the fall. As long as
that's a good point. It seems like they've learned from what happened last year. Whatever happened last year in terms of because what did that class finish at? 14th, I think, on 247 last year, where there was all this optimism going into July in August, and it just did not happen. They just missed on so many key guys that they won in that 2023 cycle. It feels like that's not going to happen in 2024. It feels like this is going to be Heupel's best class year, Jack, right?
Yeah, well, I don't see why not. And if they get one of those, as we mentioned, feels like top 10 class. So I think you have to like the trajectory right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you're top 10, I think that's where you want to be as a Tennessee fan. Like, you just gotta, because you've been at 10, that's the highest, I believe, to this point. But if, you don't, look at who they're battling against. The Ohio States, the Georgias, the Bamas, who have picked right back up post-Saban. LSU. Texas is at 14th right now. You look at, they're a powerhouse. We'll see how they finish, but it's just brutal recruiting in the sport right now. So I think fans who look at Tennessee and are just kind of frustrated with the first 3 years, I'm like, I don't know. The winning helps, obviously. The longer Heupel's here and the more 10+ win seasons they have, that will help. The more guys who go to the draft, that helps. They need Jalen Hyatt and Tedrick Tillman to have good years. They need maybe Hendon Hooker to play at Detroit at some point. They need more guys to pop at the NFL level. Matthew Butler doing well. They need some of that. But
that's a good point.
I think by and large, they're still trending up. And you want to be recruiting better than you did that first year. You want to be able to learn from mistakes from previous cycles. And I also think they're smart in where they're targeting. We're not going to Florida. The Kai Bates stuff, I'm hoping that's a thing of the past where it's you were his favorite twice and he still didn't pick Tennessee. It's it's just not.
Recruiting recruiting Florida is so unfruitful for Tennessee.
Yes. It just stop doing
it never pans out.
And it seems like by and large they're picking their spots in Georgia. They're absolutely feasting in North Carolina, which should be their bread and butter. They're keeping the guys home in the state of Tennessee that they really prioritize, and then going around the country for quarterbacks, whether it's Tennessee with George McIntyre, or whether it's California with Nico, or Georgia for Jake Merklinger, or North Carolina with Faison. Like, they're going wherever the quarterbacks are. They're like, that's their priority. But I think their recruiting strategy makes a lot of sense to me in terms of where they're targeting and how they're going about it.
Yeah, I think so too. And the North Carolina one's the big one, and I think that's also where Clemson's starting to not be what they were there
Yeah.
for a handful of years is a huge win. I mean, I think we talked about it on this pod probably in the early days of me being on here, that it was just such a hard path to Tennessee having success for it on the recruiting trail, but also just in general when you're talking about the areas Tennessee needs to go recruit. Georgia was recruiting, still is recruiting as well as anyone in the country. Now, the good news is Georgia's recruiting so well, they can recruit nationally, and there's so many good players in Georgia that, like Chase said, they've done a really good job of picking their spots. And, heck, they've won a couple battles in Georgia against Georgia each of these last 2 years. And then going into North Carolina, which has always been a bread and butter for Tennessee when they're recruiting at their best. And obviously Clemson's kind of the main team you look to compete to there. Even with North Carolina having some success, it feels like their success in the recruiting trail has gone down. So yeah, I agree with that. And what you said a minute ago, back to your original question, that's what stands out to me the most about these last couple of weeks is just the teams Tennessee's beating to get these kids. It's been some real, big time battles. And Christian Gass, you beat really good teams for. Travis Smith, you beat really good teams for. Lagonza Hayward Shady Hayward certainly his top three is really good. Yeah, I don't know what how real the Georgia interest was, but still to beat Florida. And then, Brame, it's a kid that was Tennessee and Oregon, you don't think about them as a traditional recruiting rival for Tennessee, but they're recruiting probably in the top 5 of the sport right now. So it's been a lot of really impressive wins for Tennessee. And to me, that's what stands out the most about it.
I like it. Transitioning here a little bit, position outlook spotlight series continuing on here. Jack Foster, linebacker. What do you like most about the room in 2024? How will it continue to evolve? New face who might come on this year that Vol fans don't already know. And then your biggest question mark for this linebacker room in 2024.
My biggest, that's a lot. Okay, what I like is the upside, because Arian Carter, everybody was so high on Arian Carter last year, and he had moments, but obviously the injury hampered his season early, and it didn't really feel like he splashed all that much early on. It felt like there was a little bit of freshman growing pains, so he could have a breakout season as a sophomore. T-Lander and Spurts last year was great, and he could take a step, and those two guys could be absolute dudes at the linebacker spot. I know we mentioned or talked about Keenan Pili last week a little bit or maybe it was on our RTI pod actually, Ryan, where you were saying that Keenan Pili is a little bit of an unknown for this Tennessee team, just because, he's coming off of injury. He's only played one game in a Vol uniform, but I think Keenan Pili is safe, and I like what he brings for this defense. I do think he's one of the most important players on this defense, probably second behind James Pierce. So he's a big player for Tennessee this year, and I think Keenan Pili is going to have a big season. But with the upside of Carter and T-Lander, I like, a name that might come on that, maybe not a lot of people know. I think T-Lander would be the answer to that, because in reality, a lot of just not diehard fans probably aren't all that familiar with Jeremiah T-Lander, probably a little more familiar with Arian Carter, had more snaps, or at least had more important snaps last year, and, is an in-state kid. So T-Lander would be my answer to that, and also probably the answer to the whole equation, because it feels like those sophomore linebackers taking a big step could really make this room very dangerous.
Yeah, I tend to agree. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I know. I think Jack hit the nail on the head. You have to like the sophomore talent and the underclassmen talent. What I feel good about is I feel like Tennessee's linebackers are gonna be good against the run, like especially between the tackles. I worry less about them, playing sideline to sideline, but just in pass coverage. It's a lot of big physical guys. You think of the top 3 are all guys I think of as, if not between the tackles, at least run defense guys. So is there a step for a guy like Caleb Perry? Does Jalen Smith kind of come out of the woodwork in his sophomore season? Those are guys that just from a build standpoint, and obviously Caleb Perry, I think last year was in a lot of their third down packages as a linebacker. Do those guys take a step and become, in Caleb Perry's standpoint, a little bit more of an every down player who can play in pass defense pretty well? Or Jalen Smith, that would just have to be a pretty wild second-year jump in the program for him to become that guy. But one of those guys do it. And then a guy that I really love just from having watched him a few times in high school is Edwin Spillman, the freshman. It's hard. I say all that, and he's another one of those between the tackle guys, or at least run defense guys, and he's a beast. I mean, he was a tackling machine, playing in probably the best classification in the state of Tennessee at Lipscomb, the biggest private school classification. So I think he's a really good player. To see a guy that finds a role in his freshman season, I kind of lean no, because it just feels like he's a lot like those guys that are at the top of the room. But he's one that, at least in the long term, I'm really excited for.
Yeah, and I think Edwin is probably going to be more of a special teams guy. So I think a lot of fans
Yeah.
know Edwin and just what he did at Lipscomb, and just obviously his brother in the room and the Spillman family. But he's someone that I'm excited about seeing, because I think he popped also in the spring game. I remember him having a couple big hits in that one. Like,
Yeah,
I think Edwin Spillman's going to be a dude, but it's just freshmen, generally speaking, just don't play. And in terms of just real rotations, I mean, Aaron Carter played a little bit last year, and obviously Brian John Marie really like to rotate, but we just don't know if William Inge is going to follow that same path. Is William Inge just going to only trust three, and that's just how it's going to be? Like, he's going to rotate a little bit between T-Lander, Carter, and Peely, or does he have that same outlook that Brian John Marie had in terms of getting as many guys in the fold? And do we see a lot of Caleb Perry? Do we see a lot of Jalen Smith, who's kind of the forgotten linebacker out of Grayson? Does he factor in this fall? Because that would be helpful for Tennessee if with Elijah Herring gone. Like, it's not as big of a loss, I think, as a lot of national folks saw, because they just saw leading tackler for Elijah. But he would have played. He would have been a rotation guy in this group. And I think Tennessee probably still would have, he would have been an asset to this linebacker room. He would have helped things. But you also have guys behind him that can absolutely still factor in and come on. I mean, Caleb Perry's got a different number, so folks won't. I think he's like 8 now, I want to say. Is it Caleb Perry?
Pretty
8?
sure.
Yeah. So he's flipped. Anybody else in that room is a different number? Do we know that will play?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Aaron Carter's still 7. T-Lander's 22.
Yeah, Taylor's 22. Peely's
Peely's
11.
11.
I think that's it.
Yeah, that's probably it. Jalen Smith, I think, is 38.
It's 39.
39.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think linebacker is going to be fine. But I do think because right now they've only got Christian Gass in this class. We'll see if Perlotti or another linebacker winds up. But I think it's kind of a sneaky important one for recruiting this year for linebacker, because I think they need to know like how much they'll have to go in the portal next offseason. How much do they trust? Because I think Caleb Perry's out of eligibility after this year too, right? Isn't Perry gone?
No, he's just a junior, I think.
Okay, is he? I thought he was a senior. Okay.
He came in the same class as Herring, I believe.
Okay. So you still have Perry for one more year, but you really want to see something from, I think, Jalen Smith too. Like, because Peely's going to be gone. I think the expectation is probably that it will be T-Lander if he can handle Mike, and it will be him and Arian next year. But I think you need to see something there. Jordan Burns, freshman, we'll see what he looks like. 4-star kid out of Pace Academy back in Atlanta. But I don't know. I think it will be interesting to monitor the rotations and which of these young guys, and some of these guys who've been in the program for a little bit, like Jalen Smith, if they can factor in this fall, because I think they'll show a lot in terms of what Tennessee has to do on the recruiting trail and in the portal this offseason. Switching gears here a little bit, I think fans might not be ready for this because they've circled, obviously, the Oklahoma game and why that's so important, Ryan. But this is something that I can't shake, because we've seen 3 years of Heupel's Tennessee teams on the road in the SEC, and they've had some good wins. Obviously, the LSU win on the road is probably the best win, SEC road win for Heupel in his time on Rocky Top. But by and large, it's a 50-50 gambit for this group on the road, and winning on the road in the SEC is extremely difficult. Tennessee has a weird schedule in that they don't play an important SEC game until mid-October at home, and we know that they've only lost one home game in the last 2 years. Like, now is to arguably the best program in the country right now in Georgia. It's an asset, and Heupel has protected home field really well. But they have to go to Oklahoma, and they have to go to Arkansas before they get Florida at home. And I think a lot of fans have just penciled in Arkansas as a definite win. The way I look at it is like, I think a split is the most likely, and that might mean they have a great win for Nico's first time at Oklahoma, and it's a big win, and then they have to go right back to Arkansas, and let's just say Taylor Green and Pi Petrino are cooking. I mean, I don't know. I just think a split is most likely. I would be very surprised if Tennessee is undefeated going into the Florida game. So I don't know. Do you share that sentiment that a split on the road to expect Tennessee to win back-to-back road SEC games in Nico's first season as a starter is a little bit much?
Well, I think one thing that you're getting wrong here, you keep calling it back-to-back. There's a bye week in between.
It's still back-to-back, though. It's back-to-back. Like, you're not getting a home game in between then.
That
Like, you're
doesn't
still
matter.
on the road both games.
Let me go back to my staple of Josh Heupel off of buys, and I don't have
Yeah.
the numbers in front of me.
But they're good.
They're really darn good, and I'll be pretty dang surprised if they lose to an Arkansas team that, I don't know. Again, maybe Bobby Trino figures it out. The green kid is, I think, talented, but I just don't see it. I don't think there's probably less optimism in Fayetteville for this football season anywhere in the SEC besides, I guess, West End. And that's, if you're down in Vanderbilt standard, that's pretty bad. So I just don't see it. Now, do I think it's probably most likely to split those games? Sure, because I think they're going to be underdogs at Oklahoma. So I'd say there's a 55% chance they lose that game. So sure, yeah, I think a split's the most likely chance. But to me, the North Carolina State game's the game I worry about a lot more than the Arkansas.
I don't get that. I think the NC State game, Tennessee wins by double digits.
Carolina State's better, and it's early. You just talked about it. I mean, it's Nico's truly.
It's a neutral game. It's a
North
neutral
Carolina
site in Charlotte.
Is way better than Arkansas. It's not even close.
It's different though. You're not playing at NC State. You're playing in a neutral site. Like playing in Fayetteville will be something. I'm telling you. Like
you'll
playing
be
in Fayetteville
in front of 15,000 empty seats. A fan base that's completely checked out of the football program.
They're not going to be checked out at the beginning of the season. I think that might be
head.
true at the end. They will not be checked out at the beginning of the year.
They're already checked out. I played golf with an Arkansas fan on Sunday. They're checked out. They're already talking basketball season. They can't believe Pittman got another year.
Chase, semi-bold prediction: Tennessee bounces Sam Pittman. He's fired.
Oh, oof.
Yeah,
I don't know.
All right, here you go. Arkansas schedule: Pine Bluff at home, week 1, win. At Oklahoma State, loss. UAB at home. Dude, I don't even know if that's a gimme, but let's give them a win. So they're 2-1. And then they go at Auburn, at A&M. They lose both of those games. They're 2-3. And if they get blasted by Tennessee and Fayetteville, they'll be 2-4. Bye-bye, Sam Pittman.
I think it's possible.
You think Tennessee's offense is not scoring bare minimum 35, probably 40 off of bye week against that Arkansas defense, I'm not buying it.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing,
Chase.
but if you were to tell me that there's 70 total points scored in Arkansas, Tennessee, I also would tend to agree with that sentiment.
Chase, as a Tennessee fan, are you more concerned with the Kentucky game in Neyland or the road game at Arkansas?
Road game at Arkansas, no question. Tennessee, Heupel's not losing Kentucky, especially at home.
Road game at Arkansas is closer to Vanderbilt than the Kentucky game.
Oh, I disagree. I'm telling you, Taylor Green has. I like the Petrino factor. Taylor Green, I like Taylor Green a lot. I still think winning on the road in the SEC. I think winning at Arkansas is more complicated for Tennessee than winning at Kentucky. Winning at home against Kentucky, it doesn't really matter. I'm just not worried about Kentucky in any context.
Nor should you be, but you should be even less worried about Arkansas. Is my point.
I'm not saying I think Tennessee's going to lose at Arkansas. I'm just saying right now, July 30th, I don't think Tennessee is starting out 2-0 on the road in the SEC before they get to Florida. That's all I'm saying. Is I would be very, very surprised if that. I would be overjoyed, but I also just think I struggle to see it. I struggle to see Tennessee just being undefeated on the road in the SEC to start off.
Oh, this is really just an Oklahoma question to me though, because Tennessee beats the Sooners in Norman, and then they're coming off a bye. No one's gonna pick Arkansas at all. Like
That's true.
It is just almost a bye into the home stretch.
I mean, if they lose to Oklahoma, what I would tend to go with is like with the bye and then Arkansas, like what that game will look like will be pretty brutal. I think that's where it looks like LSU, where Tennessee is just like fans are leaving at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Like if Tennessee loses to Oklahoma that 2 weeks prior, what that game will look like at Arkansas, because I don't think they're going 0-2 on the road. But if they lose to Oklahoma, I think it's an absolute blowout. But it could be an overlooked city in terms of Arkansas. Like the Solid Verbal folks, let down look ahead. If they come off this emotional high from beating Oklahoma on the road, if game day's there, and then they have this week off and they're just not fully, they're thinking about Florida and Alabama right after, like, do they overlook Arkansas on the road and just give, like, the defense isn't there, the pass rush isn't there, and Tennessee secondary gets torched and it's like 45-42 Arkansas win or something silly like that? Like, I don't know. I think it's in play. Like that's the one thing I worry about if you beat Oklahoma in dramatic fashion is just that you then move on to Florida and Alabama, and you forget that you still have to win on the road at Arkansas.
I think it'd be a real concerning sign about this team's maturity level if they can't snap in off of a bye week for the Arkansas game. To me, that would be
one of the worst teams in the league. Yeah, so you're saying, Chase, that the only way you see Tennessee losing to Arkansas is if it beats Oklahoma.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't really see the logic. I'm not going to lie, but I understand the concept of trap games.
I mean, if they beat Oklahoma, I think that's the win of the year for them. I
understand the concept of trap games, but
yeah,
that early in the season coming off a bye doesn't really feel like a trap game to me.
I mean, think about it. Like that would be 2 top 20 wins out of the gate here for Tennessee if they beat NC State and Oklahoma before they even get to Arkansas. Like I think that's added. That's a lot of early tests for Tennessee and a new quarterback in his first year as a starter. Like I just think that's a lot.
I do think, to Chase's point, I would have Kentucky and Arkansas, I'd view pretty similarly from a winning percentage chance. Thinking Arkansas is a harder game than North Carolina State. And I think I'm just maybe circling that from we talked about it a lot.
Look at the history of NC State against the SEC, and it's not good.
They're good this year.
Pittsburgh, I'll say it again. Pittsburgh went 5-7 2 years ago, and a Tennessee team that went 10-2 needed their quarterback to get hurt to win that game.
But that was at Pitt. It wasn't a neutral site.
We're gonna sit here and act like Pitt's Death Valley at night or something. All right.
Well, that's many have been saying. Many were saying. I mean, it was a Rudy situation with that backup quarterback coming in there dealing after
Acrisure.
He was
Nick Patty.
Nick Patty.
He was at Acrisure Stadium. Build the statue.
That dude was abysmal until the last drive of the game.
Hey, he played with heart.
If he just played with heart, Pittsburgh wins that game.
Gritty performance from Patty.
Gritty, I will give you. Gritty once again, much like Will McBride against Missouri in 2017.
That would have escaping that game with a win was low key just so critical for that Tennessee team in that season because
that was a Tennessee team with a senior veteran starting quarterback.
Yeah.
Knew who it's goodness knows they knew the receiver they could trust in that game. They threw it to him only 35 times. And now you're talking about a Tennessee team facing a better North Carolina State team, albeit, yes, neutral site, but a neutral site that will truly be a neutral site. A lot of neutral sites are Tennessee fans.
I don't know. I think it'll still be 75-25 Tennessee fans there.
Oh, I'd be surprised if it's that.
I think it'll be, at least 60-40.
That's not a tough drive for Tennessee fans. It's just
not at all.
They're going to come in for that one. And it's Nico's first big game. Like, that's the other part of it, is I just think so many people want to watch, like, the Nico effect.
And another reason you should think NC State is harder.
Why?
That's another big part of it to my point.
Nico's first big game.
Nico's first big game.
Yeah, it's fine. It's a neutral site.
Against a really good team.
Like, I would be floored if Tennessee lost to NC State.
If I told you Grace McCall outdid Nico in that game, like, it's not
I would be
the
floored.
biggest surprise in the world.
Yeah, Grace McCall in this offense, I don't know what he's going to look like. He's been playing in the Jamie Chadwell system, and he was banged up last year. I don't know how Grayson McCall is going to transition with Robert and I think is the OC now at NC State. So I don't know. We'll see. The quarterback play was not good at NC State last year.
Arkansas is bottom of the barrel SEC. NC State is top 5 ACC team. And I know the disparity between the leagues is vast, but still.
I don't know. Early season, week 3, do you think NC State's favored at Fayetteville? I don't think so.
Yes.
I don't think so.
Yes.
Early season, like
I
Taylor Green. Like, if you're going to tell me, like, right now, who if I had to make a prediction, who's better this year? Taylor Green and Bobby Petrino, or Robert and I and Grayson McCall? Give me Taylor Green and Bobby Petrino. Like, I think they'll be better.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think that's crazy. I think North Carolina State's defense is going to be.
It's always great though.
There's more variables in the equation there.
You know what North Carolina State is, and they're a team that's going to go 9-3.
Yeah,
and they're going to be.
And one of those guaranteed losses is to the Tennessee Volunteers in Charlotte, North Carolina. Like I'm saying it right now, guaranteed.
I'm with you.
Loss.
Tennessee's winning that game, but it's even more of a guarantee they beat Arkansas.
I just don't get, and maybe I'm too much of a slave to Vegas. I just don't get you sitting here and saying there's no chance Tennessee loses a game they're going to be like 4-point favorites in, maybe less than that.
It's just no chance. And also, if they drop that game, when I tell you the Oklahoma game is going to be absolutely nauseating because your CFP, like it's so funny how the schedule works out because if you lose to NC State, Oklahoma, where you're also going to be a dog in, suddenly becomes like a must win if you want to make the college football playoff, or your season's basically over in terms of your expectations. Like you're looking at 8-4 best case scenario. If you drop NC State and then you drop Oklahoma, you still have at Georgia on the schedule, and then you're being asked to sweep Florida and Alabama at home still. Like I don't think that's realistic because I still think they're going to split Florida and Bama. I don't think, like, the way I look at it.
No, I see what he's saying though. If you lose to NC State and Oklahoma, it's hard to see Tennessee go 9-3.
It's hard. Sure, it's hard to see it. I don't think it's impossible.
I just think that's asking a lot. I think that is
asking a lot. Sure,
you've dug yourself a huge hole in that way. So I think you need to come out of Arkansas, Oklahoma, NC State with one loss, and I think you're still control your own destiny at that point. And you still feel pretty good about your CFP chances. You drop two of those, I think it's over.
It's more likely they come out of that with 0 than 2.
I would tend to agree with that. Yeah, I would agree with that.
I mean, if I'm gonna pick Tennessee to win all those games, so
let me just go ahead and say something. And I know the scenarios changed it to your point here, Chase. If Tennessee doesn't sweep Florida and Alabama, I don't think they're making the college football playoff.
Ooh,
I think Tennessee needs to go undefeated at home.
So you don't think 10-2 gets in?
I think 10-2 gets in. I just don't think Tennessee is going to win at Oklahoma and the NC State game. I would be surprised.
They're better. Tennessee's a better team than both of those teams. Like, yes, I get one's on the road.
Slightly better than Oklahoma. And
I don't know. Like, if Nico is really, really, really good, are we just saying
winning
that
on
Jackson
the road
Darnold's
against good teams in the SEC is
really,
so
really,
hard.
really good. Tennessee's going to be fine. Yeah. What if Jackson Arnold's really, really, really good?
I think it's more likely that Nico's better.
He'll be starting that game at home, where Nico will be his first true road start.
Also, are we sure Cooper is available for all of these games? Is Cooper healthy? Like, that's a part of this. Is like the offensive line needs to be healthy. Like the offensive line, especially center.
We can get into speculating health all we want, but
but I'm just saying that matters on the road in the SEC. It's like, what does Cooper look like? How does Lance Hurd do in his first road test as protecting Nico's blind side? Like, we'll see. But I think, to Ryan's point, I don't agree with they have to sweep Florida and Bama to win.
Yeah,
they don't have to, but I think that's the most likely.
It's still just asking a lot. I mean, I don't know.
Sure,
I don't like that. I wish the bye was actually in between those games.
Win some big games.
Like they needed the bye in between Florida and Bama.
Yeah. I mean, you just sat here and talked about how we should be worried about Arkansas for 20 minutes.
No,
so
but I would hold on.
Well
I'm already saying they're splitting that one, so I would rather not use the bye there and use the bye.
By saying that, Chase, you're just saying Tennessee's losing to Oklahoma. That's all you're saying.
I tend to think that's the case right now.
Yeah. And that's the case. If that's the case, if Tennessee loses to Oklahoma, you better go beat Florida and Alabama, or you're not making the playoffs.
And
I think what would be interesting too is like I think your playoff chances come down to Athens at the end of the year at that point, because I think you're still sitting at 2 losses going to Georgia, and that game might be a CFP elimination game for Tennessee, which is fun,
but.
I don't know. What if Nico's really good by Georgia? Athens? But what if Nico's playing at a Heisman level and it just like Georgia looks a little bit different? Like, I don't know.
So yeah.
I think that's the main thing is just you need to be in the CFP conversation. You need to be in the conversation by Georgia. But either way, we'll see. I'm curious how this will all unfold in terms of this fall and what fans' expectations and everything like that. We'll put a pin in it there. We've covered a lot of ground here on this program. So Jack Foster, what can the good folks check out from you over at Omaha Productions, Rocky Top Insider, and everywhere else this week?
If you are a dog person, I cannot stress this enough. It's a 41-minute conversation with Scott Van Pelt and Jon Stewart. You think Jon Stewart, you think politics? No politics. All about dogs and the pain of losing a family dog, which I went through that a couple of years ago. Ralphie was 17. Shih Tzu my parents got when I was 2. He was my guy. Anyway, it's SVP talking about losing his dog Otis 2 years ago. John recently lost his family dog Dipper back in February. Each just talk about the outpouring of love and support they get from fans when something like that happens and how relatable something like that can be. It's a really beautiful conversation. If you're a dog person, I highly recommend you check it out. Over at Always College Football, we got a ton of stuff hyping up the season, bunch of tiers in these past couple episodes, looking at all the conferences. SEC came out yesterday, Big 12 later this week, Big 10 and ACC were last week. There's some pretty good episodes there. And then with Mina Kimes show, same thing with Greg, just with NFL. looking ahead to the NFL season, which will be here before you know it. Hall of Fame game this week. Let's get going. Football this week. Let's go.
I'm not doing it. I've never watched the Hall of Fame. I'm gonna
watch it start to finish.
You said you're gonna watch it from start to finish?
Yep, I'm gonna do it. I've never done it before. I want to do it though. Let's do it. I'm ready. I'm ready to be miserable in the fourth quarter. But
what a 22-year-old thing to say. Ryan Schumpert, what about you over at Rocky Top Insider this week?
Yeah, all fall camp stuff. We're getting going, so we'll have practice observations every day. Plenty of coverage from Hypo. We'll talk both on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then pressers all week. We'll have that. Little depth chart projections. Just plenty of Tennessee football stuff as we get closer and closer to kickoff.
There you go. Jack Foster, Ryan Schumpert, always a pleasure, and I will talk to y'all next week.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.